to this panel, and hope your day is going well at the conference. I'm Katrina Stevenson. I'm the General Counsel and Deputy CEO of the Publishers Association. We are the member organisation for UK publishing, and our members span consumer and academic and higher and further education and education publishing. We have about 170 members, and they range from all different sizes and specialisms, and as many of you know, we have a wide range of different types of work, including one very important pillar, which is our content protection and enforcement work, which is largely what we are here to talk about today. So I wondered if I could begin by introducing this amazing panel that we have today, who've come here to talk to us about this topic. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Pippa Watts, who is here. Pippa is Senior Contracts and Anti-Piracy Manager at Scholastic, which is the world's largest publisher and distributor of children's books and a leading provider in curriculum and professional services. And Pippa is a very important stakeholder for the PA, as she is not only engaged in many of the issues on which we are focused at the moment, from AI to education policy, but she is also currently the co-chair of our anti-piracy working group and guides our work and operations in that space. So, welcome, Pippa. And then at the very other end, we have Rachel Alexander. So Rachel is a partner at the law firm Wigan, with which we and publishers themselves work closely. And Rachel is a litigator with vast experience representing creative industries clients, including publishers, and in running cases in the UK High Court and Court of Appeal and Supreme Court, as well as coordinating strategic litigation on a multi-jurisdictional basis. And some of you may be familiar with the work that has taken place over the years to tackle Sci-Hub, which we work closely with Rachel. And then next we have Detective Constable Brandon Savage here from the City of London Police Intellectual Property Crime Unit. And Brandon is one of the key officers in charge of what's known as Operation Creative, which is PIPCU's anti-piracy initiative, which I'm going to let you describe later rather than trying to describe myself. And finally, my colleague Jack Newton. Jack is Head of Content Protection and Enforcement at the Publishers Association. He has over 15 years' experience working in this area and has really taken our operations from strength to strength since he joined a couple of years ago. He's also been on secondment to PIPCU for the past 6 years and has close ties to law enforcement agencies around the world. So, thank you all so much for being here. I'd like to start off, Pippa, with you, if I may. I think it's useful to sort of think, first of all, about the problem we face. And so I wonder if you can talk to us about, you must see firsthand the types of threats that affect our industry. And what does the content protection landscape look like to a publisher such as Scholastic?
Right, thank you for the introduction. Quite overwhelming. The landscape, it's a mixed one. We've got, free books, people wanting free books is not new, as we all know, and we all like a bargain, but that is currently at the expense of people's livelihoods, because there's a real monetary impact in pirated copies of books. If an author's sales bottom out because everyone's reading the book for free, they're not going to get another contract, which means they're not going to write another book. But also, if you multiply that across a range of titles and authors on any one publishing list, there's going to be freezing hires, redundancies, because the sales aren't coming in to justify business expansion. So from a direct respect, I would say it's whack-a-mole. If you recall the lengths that people went to get copies of the Testaments when that was on the booker list, of emailing people, accosting people in taxis, all sorts of, it's just bonkers, quite honestly, the reasons why people want to try and get hold of free books. We have libraries. We don't have many, but we do still have libraries. You can get hold of free books. So the most common and ongoing threat is digital piracy and the illegal sharing of books. But it's not just the dark web. It's legitimate sites like Spotify, SoundCloud, eBay, even Amazon, where you see users uploading pirated. It's weird. Sometimes it's scanned copies of physical books that they've done, and sometimes it is they've stripped the protection out of ebooks and they're uploading it for people to share for free. And the rationale behind it is bonkers, because you can get books for free already, you can buy books for free, for free, but you can get them legitimately for free or at a low cost. But for some people, there's a real big sense of, I have to be able to supply this to everybody via my own weird way of doing it for free. And that's what we have to fix. And as a publisher, that's what we have to try and stop, so people buy the legal version and keep people like me in a job, and people like all of us here in the room in a job. But not everyone's doing it deliberately illegally. So as a children's publisher, big problem for us is people reading and showing copies of picture books on YouTube. Sounds strange, but it is very, very popular. Picture books actually all the way up to people reading YA books, and each video is a chapter, and it takes them hours. And I don't know why they do it. And some of them are awful, and some of them are really well done. And that trend for podcasts and online reading, that's just growing across other sites. It's on Audible, it's on Spotify, it's on sites I've never heard of. And it's clear that, but lots of viewers, it's quite clear that they don't realise that by viewing that, they're adding to the general sense of a growing network of pirated books. They don't realise it's illegal. And then when you take them down, they get very angry, which is something else that we have to face as publishers, which we don't think of. But whilst most videos might only have a few hundred views, some have thousands. So when I was checking on my data for this talk, I clicked on a very popular children's book, which has an anniversary out soon. Top 4 videos had over 1 million views each. And if you think that that book might sell for an average price of, say, £4 or £5, if only a third of the people viewing that video would buy that book, that's a massive loss of revenue. But then if you have that for people who are on their debut book, and their debut might only get, say, 500 views on YouTube, that's still a few £1,000s that they're not getting, that's not going towards paying their bills, that's not adding to their Nielsen sales rankings, that's then not going to get them another contract, it's not going to get them publicity budget for their book. And it all has a knock-on effect, which we all know, and it's just how do we control it? But one of the things that does concern me is platforms like Spotify, who want us to add our audiobook list to their platform so people will buy it. But why are people going to buy an audiobook from a platform like Spotify if they can just click on Emma Jones 2345 and listen to them reading the book quite well for free? They're not going to. And Spotify and other platforms like it, I'm not singling them out, they're not taking enough action to stop that happening, but they still want all of our content. And I think as publishers, that's something we need to step up and say, we need you to take the action to protect our content if you want us to give it to you legitimately. And we're great at saying we're going to do that, but we're not quite so good at following through. But then that's why we have people like Jack and you at the PA and you helping us to sort it all out. But yeah, it's hard work and it's ongoing. But I think one of the biggest issues is people's understanding. And I know that the PLS and the CLA, they're already very good at trying to get that public understanding of licensing and not using pirated books out there. But I think, yeah, we do need to do more work to say, just because there's 40 copies of one book out there for free doesn't mean that it's right for you to read that book. Just because you can buy a physical copy of a book, and I mean a physical copy that's been photocopied and spiral bound at your university, doesn't mean you should buy that copy instead of buying the legitimate one, just because it's going to cost you a lot more money. It doesn't mean the cheaper way is the right way to do it. And I think that innocent pirates, for want of a better phrase, is probably the biggest difficulty that we're facing at the moment.
Yeah, it sounds like it. And just thinking about the example you gave on of platforms, we've certainly seen people, situations where people have used Amazon's self-publishing tool.
Oh, yes.
To
yes.
upload what is not original content at
Yep.
all. It's not their copyright
No.
work. It's the copyright work of another person that they have uploaded, and then they undercut the price slightly
Yes.
of the original. And Amazon's algorithm will then put
Yeah.
that to the top. So you have someone who was actually trying to buy a legitimate copy of the book,
Yeah,
inadvertently
exactly.
then buying a pirated copy.
Yep,
So,
and they put a lovely official cover on it. We took down did an infringement on Amazon the other day of a quiz book based on one of our popular YA books. But when you looked at it, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know it wasn't official. Possibly if you read the little blurb, but who reads the blurb? They look at the cover and they go, oh yeah, that's the version I want. I can buy it for £8 or £10 because it's Amazon, you know, it's deducted. Oh, but actually, look, that seller's doing it for £4. I'm going to buy their one because it's already cheaper. And then you get it and you're like, half of it's dark, you can't read it. Is this actually the version?
Yeah.
And okay, they're complaining, but they're complaining because they've got a bad copy. They're not going, Amazon, why are you letting these people sell these books? So I think it is. I think it's public awareness. But the industry, you guys are doing a great job, you know, and the PLS and the CLA, by having those licenses in places for things like copying and permission extracts, that's great, and that is helping to reduce it. But if you can go on a nice, legitimate, reputable platform and access this content for free, how do you get that to stop? And I think that's the biggest, that's the current theme, I would say, for publishing piracy at the moment.
great.
Sadly.
Thank you very much for those introductory remarks. That leads me nicely on, if I may, to ask a question to you, Jack. So over the last sort of 2 to 3 years, you know, at the PA, we've worked to tackle various content protection threats through a wide range of different efforts and work streams. Can you talk about what an effective content protection strategy looks like?
Yeah, sure. So the Publishers Association's work in protecting our members from IP crime is very wide-ranging. There are multiple options available to us. We're notified of a case of IP crime. The PA have pretty much tried them all over the years, I would say. You know, every case is different though, but you know, I do think a strategy does need to be multifaceted, but also flexible to deal with the differing components of a particular threat and all of the potentially rapid technological changes that can happen, particularly with threats of a digital nature. Something that perhaps underpins every case is ensuring that we have detailed, up-to-date data and intelligence of a problem. Let's use a giant pirate site network as an example. Understanding this key piracy threat is crucial. While we may already know about this pirate site, you know, our members will already know about it, I think it's quite important sort of to document and map out all of the information relating to that one network and have it in one point of reference. So in the past, we've done this in I call it a deep dive investigative report. So the type of information that is gathered includes things like the level of infringement, how many titles are being pirated, website usage trends, how many people are visiting this website or these websites and from where. Domain infrastructure is an important one. So how many websites are there? Where are these domains being hosted? And what organizations are being used to host and register them. Open source intelligence of the website owner, I mean, if known, which very rarely website owners are invariably not known. But having this information on, you know, on who they are and where they are based, and maybe in an ideal world if there are any contact details available. And probably one of the most important things, how they're making money, you know, and what sort of online payment systems are they using. In addition to this, the Publishers Association can turn to our copyright infringement portal. This system crawls over 3,000 pirate websites, capturing infringements, and it provides the facility for members to issue takedown notices for all of the infringements found. This gives us really valuable access to live data. And having good digital intelligence like this allows us to scope out what areas of a pirate network or a threat can be targeted, and if disrupted or removed, how significantly our chosen action will impact the operations of that pirate site. Having this intelligence also provides us with a holistic view of a digital piracy problem, and it can help shape possible next steps of an enforcement strategy. And these next steps can include what I regard as standard website disruption. So this is sending a takedown notice to the website hosting provider, or issuing a search engine delisting request to the Googles and Bing search engines. This just makes the discoverability of a pirate site more difficult if that is removed. We can also explore website blocking actions under the Copyright Designs and Patents Act. This is where rights holders apply to UK courts to block users on the main internet service providers in the UK, and that's from stopping users from accessing certain sites. Another option is law enforcement referrals to agencies such as PIPCU, but beyond that as well. So escalation to global law enforcement organisations such as Interpol and Europol for worldwide threats. Digital piracy knows no borders, as we would expect. We're also increasingly seeing in investigations where multiple publishing organisations we're all working toward the same problem. So in these cases, I find it very beneficial to combine forces and pool resources with other national and international publishing associations to combat a shared global threat. And in some cases, the most effective strategy can include all of what I've just spoken about and beyond.
Thank you. So you've touched a little bit upon both sort of civil litigation routes of enforcement and criminal enforcement routes. So maybe we can come in turn now to Rachel and Brandon on those. Rachel, in terms of civil enforcement, site blocking, website blocking has been increasingly used to tackle digital piracy over the past 10 years or so. I wonder if you can first maybe just describe in a sentence or two what that is, and also tell us how these applications work in practice and how the remedy is developing.
Yeah, sure. So taking the broad picture first, and as Jack has mentioned, website blocking injunctions are orders that require internet service providers to implement technical measures to impede access by their subscribers to infringing websites. So they're sought against the likes of BT, Sky and Virgin Media. The orders are granted on the basis that the ISP's services are being used by third parties to infringe, and that the internet service provider is best placed to bring the infringing activity to an end. So this is really recognising the challenges of enforcing in the online environment, recognising that piracy operations can be operated from anywhere in the world, and in many cases it's difficult to pinpoint who is behind the operation. So it's recognising those practical challenges. The orders are granted on a sort of no liability basis as against the internet service provider. So no liability is asserted against the ISP itself. The orders operate on a territorial basis. So, for instance, an order granted in the UK will only have impact on access in the UK. So if you're going to seek the relief on a wider basis, you do need to get orders in different jurisdictions. Now, also important to understand is that the orders don't lead to the takedown of the target website. So the website does continue to operate. But the orders have been shown to reduce access to the website by 70 to 80% in the territory in which the order is sought. So they do have a substantive effect on access to the site. The precedent for obtaining site blocking applications in the UK was established in a case called Newsbin 2 back in 2011. So we have had quite a long period of developing these orders and establishing a procedure for obtaining them. That case established the thresholds that need to be satisfied by the rights holder in order to get the order. And in the context of copyright infringement, the 4 thresholds that need to be met are firstly, that the ISP is a service provider within the relevant legislation, which is now very established. The second is that the operators and users of the target website infringe copyright. The third is that the users and or the operators of the target website use the services of the ISPs to do that. And then the fourth is that the ISPs have actual knowledge of this. And then very importantly, before granting the order, the court will consider whether it's proportionate to grant the order. So considering whether it's appropriate, looking at all the relevant circumstances. And in addition to considering the proportionality of the order, the court will also look at other elements such as whether the order is necessary, whether it's going to be dissuasive, whether it will have any impact on legitimate trade, and whether it strikes a fair balance between different fundamental rights. In the UK, these types of orders are dynamic, which is important from a practical perspective. So this means that if the target website changes its locations, if it changes its URL or domain name or IP address, we can notify the ISPs of those new locations so that the block list can be updated. And you can do that without having to go back to court. So in practice, regular notifications are sent to the ISPs to update them on the locations that need to be blocked under each order. And that's also the mechanism to update the ISPs of any locations that need to be removed from the block list if they're no longer being used by a target website. As I've mentioned, the orders have been developed over time to ensure that there are appropriate safeguards. So there are provisions allowing any affected third party to apply to court, although there's never been any such application made. And they've also been extended to adapt to to apply to different types of targets. So orders have been obtained against direct download sites, against video streaming sites, BitTorrent sites, cyber lockers and IPTV services. So they've been used and adapted to apply in different circumstances. And these orders have also formed the blueprint for obtaining what we call live blocking orders, which are the orders you might have heard about that tackle the streaming of live sports events. So it shows that it is an adaptive and flexible remedy. In terms of how it's been applied to the publishing industry, the first order that we obtained was back in 2015, which was an order targeting 7 websites, including the Library Genesis website, which some of you may have heard of, and also the predecessor site of Zeb Library was also included in that order. And then subsequently in 2021, we obtained an order against Sci-Hub in the UK. And in all of these cases, the websites targeted are really focused on infringement and infringe publishers' copyright on a huge scale. We've also coordinated blocking applications against Sci-Hub and Library Genesis across multiple other territories. And so we've obtained these sorts of orders in France, Germany, Spain and Russia, to name a few, working with counsel in those jurisdictions. And whilst the rationale for granting website blocking orders in these other jurisdictions is broadly the same, the levels of evidence and the exact procedures will vary. And so in some jurisdictions, they have an administrative procedure rather than a judicial process. And then a few final points. The first is that we have made refinements to these orders over time to improve their efficacy. So one example is that the orders that we have obtained also apply to copycat sites that use the same branding of the site that we initially target. So they have sort of a broader remit in some circumstances. And also these orders can be used for other purposes. So we also notify them to Google to achieve delisting of the relevant URL. So they can be used for wider initiatives as well. So hopefully that gives a sort of broad overview.
Such a fantastic remedy that we have in the UK, and one that isn't available in the United States. I think there are something like, last time I counted, I don't know, mid-30s up to 40 countries with that remedy, but certainly not available everywhere. So it's one that we should really make good use of. So anyway, so we've touched upon disruption, we've touched upon civil litigation. Perhaps we could turn now to the sort of criminal enforcement side. And Brandon, can you explain the role of PIPCU and the type of work that the unit does in this area?
Yeah, well, thanks for the invite and the introduction. So I'm Brandon Savage. I'm a detective constable with City London Police, and I work on Intellectual Property Crime Unit, or PIPCU as we're most commonly known. So the department's been around for about 2013, so coming on 11 years now. We're City London Police Department, but we're funded by the Intellectual Property Office, so the IPO. So we're funded by them as dedicated IP. So we're, broadly speaking, there's only about 22 of us, so we're quite a small unit, but we do have a national remit. And so the remit is to investigate and deter serious intellectual property crime. So that 22 includes our senior management. We have like an office manager. We've got dedicated media investigators, which is really important with any crime now, because if you've got devices that you need to download, you can go on a long list. So we've got dedicated staff for that. We've got most of it is made up with detective constables and police staff investigators that do the investigations work. And then we'll have a researcher and analyst as well. But broadly speaking, we're split into two. So we've got an investigations team and then a disruptions team. So the investigations team is the larger side of it. So we're more commonly recognised for things like counterfeit goods. So we're up and down the country executing warrants, arresting suspects, searching warehouses, business premises, shops, seizing literally lorry loads of goods. We've got a few lorry drivers on the team. We're running out of those now, so I think some of us are too young to have that. We've got to do courses. But we'll hire lorries to secure all those goods. So that's the bulk of what we'll do, and that's where the bulk of our budget goes, unfortunately, with things like storage. But we'll also have other things as well. So we'll have, like for the music industry, they suffer quite a bit with hacking offences. So you have a lot of artists and studios that are subject to things like social engineering. They'll have pre-release material that's hacked that will be sold on the internet to the highest bidders in pre-release forums. And we've had some of those as well. And then also things that have got high harm. So you might have counterfeit medications. So we've arrested people that have been selling COVID vaccines, injecting elderly people for £100 a time. Obviously, there's significant risks there. So we're engaged in those sorts of offences as well. So that's just a small sample of what the investigations look like. The disruption side of it is slightly different. That's mainly focused on cyber disruptions. So there is another element to it as well, but cyber disruptions is the big part of that. And how that's come about is things like digital piracy. So Opcreative focuses on that. That's an anti-piracy operation. So I work on that with Abden Noor. He's a DC that's been with PIPQ since the start. And that's still considered, I'd say, to be groundbreaking initiative. So that came about for cyber, I'd call them cyber dependent or at least cyber enabled crimes, where we can't do the traditional go and arrest someone on the doorstep, because a lot of the pirate sites that we're talking about, whether it be publishing, movies, music, whatever that might be, are going to be located across the world. So you're going to have the infrastructure, you might have the domain operator in one country, the infrastructure set in a few different countries, and you can't just go and knock on the door and arrest them. The process to try and do that is really long, really lengthy, and can often end in absolutely nothing at all. So to try and get around that and not just be faced with that brick wall and just leave that alone, we've come up with a disruption side of it. So how that works is that Opcreative has a web portal that we had built, I think, when Opcreative started in about 2014, so very early stages of PIPQ. And we have representatives from all of the different creative industries, so publishing, movie, music, gaming, software and sports we can squeeze in there as well. So people like Jack will be the representative. We have MOUs in place, and then we have investigator accounts. So the pirate sites that are found, they're referred to us. It's not always all of them. What we generally consider them like the worst of the worst, because there's too many out there for us to handle all at once. So they'll be referred through the portal. They'll be evidenced with something like a witness statement that evidences the infringement, screenshots, quite basic stuff that shows that there is an offence there. We then review those referrals. We'll review the website as well, happy that a criminal offence has been committed, and then we go through a phased process of disruption. So the first initial part of that is the internet infrastructure. So it will be the domain operator themselves. So we'll try where we can, because obviously not a lot of them will make themselves known, and GDPR hampers that sometimes. So we'll engage with them, give them a cease and desist warning notice, 14 days. That's already been done by the stakeholders themselves anyway, whatever industry it's in. That's one of the sort of prerequisites that we have for that. We'll give them 14 days notice to either legitimise or remove the infringing content. That rarely happens because it's nearly 100% of the content they've got is infringing. They've not got the rights to it, and they know that. But we do that anyway, because if we go through the criminal prosecution the normal way, further down the line, we can say, this is what we've done first off. Where that fails, or in tandem with that, we'll go to places like registrars, hosting providers, registries like Nominet. So we're really fortunate in the UK that .uk.co.uk, Nominet are very, very proudly pro-law enforcement, whereas other areas of the world and not so much. And IP crime, unfortunately, is one of those things that falls down the list of crime. Some places don't even recognise it as a crime, particularly. So that's difficult. Whereas Nominet, completely different, and they work with us. So we'll go down that route. But in tandem with that, we'll also go for other enablers as well. So that will be primarily financial enablers. And I split those into two categories. So you've got subscription-based. So if you're familiar with like IPTV, so the dodgy Sky subscriptions, that kind of thing, those ones will be subscription models. So people will pay for like a month or a day or 3 months or a year, whatever that might be. And then obviously that gives us really good lines of inquiry to disrupt. So we've got financial providers that we engage with. Nearly all of them will be regulated, so we can make contact with them and they'll be supportive. So once we identify or make them aware that they've got a criminal entity there using their services, they can shut them down. We've got like cryptocurrencies as well. That's a little more difficult, but not impossible. And we can seize it, we can trace it. I'm a crypto spot for our team, so I do a lot of that for the cyber side and also the hard goods side as well. With publishing, we find more and more, I think the funding model for that is donation pages. It's quite different. I'd say it's quite unique compared to some of the other piracy in that they don't always have payment facilities there. It's donation models, and that's normally cryptocurrency, but there are other ways as well. So we can disrupt those. The other part of that, and I'd say subscription primarily for things like IPTV, but for the other piracy, some movie streaming, sports streaming, publishing, and what am I missing there? The music industry is the sites will draw their revenue from advertising. So that probably makes up about 80% of those that aren't IPTV is advertising. So what we do with that is we have a third-party service and provider that assists us. So we feed in the list of websites we've got. We call that the infringing website list, so the IWL. There's about 7,600 on there at the moment. So by no means is that all the pirate sites that are out there, but generally we consider them worst of the worst. Now, I think it's about just over 5,500 of those are down. So it's about 72% success rate so far. So they will monitor the ad placement on those sites, and they give us a lot of data, and then we use that data to target our disruptions. So it will be brands in particular. So if we find a brand that is advertising on pirate sites, we will contact those brands. Now, the bigger, more well-known, I won't name any, but I think one of them was next door, actually. I went in there by accident when I was trying to find this place. But we'll engage with them, and they were very good, I must say. So you're funding crime. Obviously tell them that IP crime is a crime. It's an organised crime, and it's linked to other offences as well. You're funding that. Can we encourage you some way to stop doing it? And so they will. So they'll take away their advertising from it. You've got advertising companies and the intermediaries in between. That sometimes is a little complex because some companies have lost control of their advertising processes. So they farm that out to third parties. Some of those third parties aren't always as willing, and they're not always based in the UK or countries that are particularly friendly, so that can be quite difficult. But we'll do what we can with that. We'll try and strip those of the ad placement, and that can take away their funding. So they're the two sort of primary ways that we deal with that. That can be quite complex. It's quite dynamic as well. So IPTV, for example, the funding models for that. If you go onto an IPTV site, you click on a package you want to buy, it might take you to a third-party provider, and then you'll notice in there sometimes that they'll have a different company name. They'll use that to try and obfuscate the compliance checks. So they'll get through, go under the radar with a lot of the companies. So we have to try and trawl those sites, give them that data. That can take a long time. So if you're trying to do sort of mass casualty and lots of data, it can still be quite slow. The other thing that we notice a lot more with IPTV is that rather than just the payment provider on this site with a dodgy company name, they'll also have a completely different website. So it'll redirect you to a site that looks on the face of it, and it will be just a front end that you're buying a fitness program. So same price points, very similar layout to the IPTV site, but it will be a completely hollow site, fitness programs, meal plans, something like that. So again, designed to obfuscate that. So we engage with the different companies, and they can be quite proactive sometimes, which is really good. Because then what we do, so I said that we have the web portal, where we have this IWO, which is effectively just a curated list of pirate sites. We'll constantly try to action enforcement against them. But as well as the investigator accounts from all the stakeholders, we also have user accounts, and we've got well over 800 now. I added some more yesterday, so they come from all over the place. So they'll come from possibly people today that might make use of it. They'll come from other events that we might attend as well, but advertising industry, brands will sign up. I always use a good example of the UK Gambling Commission. That's got lots of teeth for us. There's lots of leverage there because any gambling providers that want to operate in the UK have to have a licence with the Gambling Commission. To do that, they've got to abide by certain conditions. If they breach those conditions, they can be penalised financially or have their licence removed. So there's real incentive for them, and one of those is to engage with us. So again, UK Gambling Commission, a fantastic relationship that we have with them. We'll give them a quarterly report of all the ad placement, and if any UK registered gambling providers are found on that list, they will then contact them and say, you're in breach of your conditions, you need to shape up, contact PIPQ, work a way that you can sort this out, they'll provide you with the data, and then they'll reduce it. And I've got slides I would be able to show, but certainly last year, the number of sites they were advertising on, the number of ad impressions, which is each time we believe people are clicking on those adverts, and the number of brands that are found on there reduced quarter on quarter. That spikes sometimes because the list is always being updated, so it's hard for some companies to get ahead, and there's new gambling providers as well. So overall, I would say that we have a really good response and people come down. So they'll sign up to the IWL and they'll be proactive. So they'll use that, they'll download that list and use it as a naughty list to steer clear of. So yesterday I had an American company, they're a travel company. I'd not heard of them before. They wanted to have access to the list, so I created new accounts for them, asked them, you know, if you could just let us know how did you come across us? And they said that it was to do with a UK company that they've got a contract with. So they're trying to do business in the UK. That company has it written within their license agreements that they have to engage with PIPQ and what the IWL does. So although we're a small team, we do have quite far reach. But we also do traditional investigations as well. So like Jack and I made a referral to us to do with the Z Libraries Network. That's an ongoing investigation, so I won't go into sort of many details here, but that was with Interpol. We had the Korean authorities, German authorities. I think Singapore was involved in that as well, but a leading agency in that was the FBI, because while we were going through these sort of constant talks about ways forward and things that we could do to try and tackle the network, they went and arrested some individuals that were Russian nationals that had flown into a South American country. So they'd managed to pick them up quickly, then updated us after. And that was about a year ago now, wasn't it? But extradition proceedings. So that's what I'm saying about traditional investigations can be really long. But where they're targeted at a big network, that is still the way to go, where we can do it. And that's where we engage with all our foreign partners and we can get real traction on investigations like that.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No, that's great. It's fantastic. And it was great you touched upon at the end some of the sort of more publishing-specific IP crime threats. I think what really jumps out at me is actually that, yes, it can be very difficult to find the source of some of this IP crime, but what we can do is we can go after the intermediaries that provide services, whether it's through website blocking and, you know, going for the ISPs, or whether it's through payment or advertising providers, or possibly even platforms which are facilitating it.